I stood there in the backyard of what used to feel like home, holding a paper plate so tightly it began to warp in my trembling hands. The laughter that erupted from my stepmother Brenda and stepbrother Scott felt like a chorus of mockery, their voices blending into a symphony of cruelty that had become the soundtrack of my life for the past 5 years. My name is Chloe Miller, and for half a decade, I had been nothing more than a walking ATM machine for my father Richard, his new wife Brenda, and her son Scott. What started as helping out family had morphed into financial slavery, and I had been too blind, too desperate for my father's approval to see it happening. It all began when Dad remarried 3 years after Mom died. I was 22 then, working 2 jobs, and still living at home while finishing my business degree at the community college. Brenda moved in with her then 19-year-old son Scott, and suddenly our modest 3-bedroom house felt cramped with resentment and unspoken hierarchies. Dad had always been distant, but Mom had been the glue holding our small family together. Without her, I was just an obligation he seemed eager to forget. The first time Dad asked me to help with the mortgage, I didn't hesitate. He said it was temporary, just until he got back on his feet after the wedding expenses. That was 5 years ago. The temporary arrangement became permanent, and the mortgage payments were just the beginning. Soon, I was covering the utility bills because Brenda didn't work, and Dad's income as a warehouse supervisor wasn't enough to support his new family's lifestyle. Then came the car insurance for Scott's truck, the cable and internet bills, the credit card payments for furniture Brenda just had to have. I worked 50-hour weeks at an accounting firm and picked up freelance bookkeeping gigs on weekends. Every paycheck went straight into the family pot, and I lived on scraps. I wore the same clothes until they fell apart. I brought packed lunches to work while Scott ordered takeout every night. I drove a 15-year-old sedan held together with duct tape and prayer while Dad and Brenda leased a brand new SUV. And whenever I dared to suggest maybe they could contribute more, or maybe Scott could get a job, I was met with variations of the same response. You're family. Family helps each other. Don't be selfish. The warning signs had been there all along, glaring red flags I had deliberately ignored because I was terrified of being alone. Every time Brenda made a snide comment about my clothes, every time Scott helped himself to my laptop or my car without asking, every time Dad dismissed my exhaustion with a wave of his hand, I told myself it would get better. I told myself they would eventually see my worth, appreciate my sacrifice, treat me like I mattered. I was wrong. The barbecue that Saturday afternoon in late June was supposed to be a celebration. The Hendersons from next door were there, along with Uncle Pete and Aunt Martha. Dad stood at the grill wearing his king of the barbecue apron, playing the role of the jovial family man. Brenda flitted around in a new sundress I had unknowingly paid for with my latest credit card payment, playing hostess. Scott lounged in a deck chair, beer in hand, contributing nothing as usual. I had just handed Dad a platter for the steaks when he made his announcement, loud enough for everyone to hear. The words hit me like a physical blow. But it wasn't just the words themselves. It was the casual cruelty in his tone, the way he said it with a laugh, as if my homelessness was a punchline to a joke only he found funny. The Hendersons looked uncomfortable, suddenly very interested in their potato salad. Uncle Pete shifted awkwardly, and I saw Aunt Martha's hand fly to her mouth. But Brenda and Scott, they laughed. Brenda's high-pitched cackle mixed with Scott's deep guffaw, and something inside me finally snapped. For 5 years, I had bent over backward to keep this family afloat. I had sacrificed my 20s, my savings, my sanity, all for people who saw me as nothing more than a revenue stream. I had swallowed my pride, my anger, my hurt, hoping that one day they would see me as family instead of a checkbook. But standing there with that misshapen paper plate in my hands, listening to them laugh at the idea of throwing me out on the street, I realized the truth with crystal clarity. I was never going to be enough for them. No amount of money, no level of self-sacrifice, no degree of compliance would ever make them respect me or love me. I was useful, and that was all I would ever be. The rage that flooded through me was cold and sharp, nothing like the hot, impotent anger I had felt before. This was different. This was clarity. This was decision. I set down the plate with deliberate care, and when I looked up at my father, my voice was ice. Fine, you want me gone? I'll go. And I'm taking your precious ATM machine with me. The laughter died. Richard's smile faltered, replaced by a sneer. Don't be dramatic, Chloe. You know I didn't mean it like that. Didn't you? I met his eyes, and I saw the moment he realized I wasn't backing down. You want me to pay rent or leave? I choose to leave. And just so we're clear, I'm taking everything I've been paying for with me. Brenda's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent backyard, that starting immediately, you're on your own. Every bill I've been covering, every expense I've been shouldering, it's all yours now. Enjoy your barbecue. I walked into the house, leaving stunned silence in my wake. I could hear Dad starting to sputter, Brenda's voice rising in indignation. But I didn't stop. I went straight to my room and started packing. My hands moved with mechanical efficiency, pulling clothes from drawers, gathering my few precious belongings, my mother's jewelry box, my laptop, the photo albums I had hidden away, the important documents I had been smart enough to keep in a lockbox under my bed. I worked through the evening, through the sounds of the party breaking up, through the angry footsteps in the hallway and the knock on my door that I ignored. By midnight, the house was silent. I made 3 trips to my car, loading everything that mattered. What I couldn't take, I left behind without regret. The furniture Dad had promised was mine, but never actually gave me. The TV in the living room I had bought, but they had claimed. Material things, all of them. And I had learned the hard way that things could be replaced. Dignity could not. The secret I hadn't shared during my cold announcement was that I had been preparing for this moment for 6 months. Not consciously at first, but something in me had known this day was coming. I had opened a separate bank account Dad didn't know about. I had been siphoning off small amounts from each paycheck, building a safety net. I had even found a small rental house on the outskirts of town, a tiny 2-bedroom cottage with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but it was mine. The lease had been signed 2 weeks ago, the first month's rent and deposit paid with money I had hidden away like a squirrel preparing for winter. As the first hints of dawn painted the sky, I took one last look at the house where I had grown up, where my mother had lived and loved and died. I felt no nostalgia, no regret, only a strange, hollow relief. I climbed into my beat-up sedan, turned the key, and drove away. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I simply disappeared from their lives as thoroughly as they had erased my worth. The cottage was exactly as I remembered it, small, shabby, but blessedly quiet. I hauled my belongings inside, and then, before I even unpacked a single box, I sat down at my laptop. The first email went to my father. Subject line, "I'm gone." The body was brief. "You wanted me to pay rent or leave. I've left. From this moment forward, every bill is yours to handle. Good luck." Then I got to work on the real task. I logged into every account, every service, every utility I had been paying for. Electric company, water department, internet provider, car insurance for Scott's truck, the credit cards in my name that I had been using to cover their expenses. One by one, I canceled my authorization, removed my payment information, closed the accounts I could, and transferred the others to Dad's name. The phone started ringing within an hour. Dad's name flashed on the screen, then Brenda's, then Scott's. Text messages flooded in. "I'm sure you're joking. Call me right now. You can't do this. You're being ridiculous." I blocked all 3 numbers and kept working. By noon, I had dismantled 5 years of financial entanglement. Every automatic payment canceled, every joint account closed, every authorization revoked. The freedom was dizzying. I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. Then I unpacked enough to make the cottage livable, fell into bed, and slept for 14 hours straight. I woke to pounding on my door. The sun was high, and I squinted at my phone. 3 in the afternoon, the pounding continued, accompanied by my father's voice. "Chloe, open this door, we need to talk." I pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, splashed water on my face, and went to confront the inevitable. But this time, I was ready. This time, I wasn't the desperate daughter begging for scraps of affection. I was the woman who had finally learned to say no. I opened the door but left the screen door latched. Dad stood on the small porch, Brenda and Scott flanking him like malevolent bookends. Richard's face was red, a vein throbbing in his temple. Brenda looked like she had been sucking on lemons. Scott, for once, didn't look bored. He looked nervous. "This joke ends now," Dad barked. "Turn everything back on. The utilities, the internet, Scott's insurance. All of it. Right now." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "It's not a joke, Dad. You told me to pay rent or get out. I got out. Now you get to pay your own bills." "Don't be ridiculous. You know we can't afford all that." "Then I suggest you figure it out. You're all adults. Surely you can manage your own household expenses." Brenda's voice was shrill. "You ungrateful little brat, after everything we've done for you." I laughed, and even I was surprised by how bitter it sounded. "Done for me? Let me make sure I understand. You moved into my home. You spent my money. You treated me like a servant and an ATM combined, and somehow I'm the ungrateful one?" I turned and grabbed the file folder I had prepared, the one filled with 5 years of bank statements, credit card bills, and receipts. I had spent my entire Sunday morning organizing it, highlighting every payment I had made for this family. I unlatched the screen door just long enough to toss the folder at Dad's feet. "There," I said, "that's the evidence of your joke. 5 years of me bleeding myself dry while you all lived in comfort. 5 years of sacrifices you never acknowledged, expenses you never appreciated, exhaustion you never saw. Add it up, Dad. Every dollar I poured into this family that treated me like garbage. We're done." "You can't do this," Brenda shrieked. "Watch me," I said, and I closed the door. They stood there for another 10 minutes, yelling, threatening, pleading. I turned up the radio and ignored them. Eventually, they left, tires squealing on the gravel driveway. I should have felt guilty. A good daughter would have felt terrible for abandoning her family in their time of need. But all I felt was a fierce, blazing satisfaction. For the first time in 5 years, I had chosen myself. And it felt incredible. The next few weeks were a blur of text messages, voicemails, and attempted ambushes. They tried everything. Dad swung between rage and fake concern. Brenda oscillated between insults and guilt trips. Scott, predictably, tried manipulation. One message from Scott stood out. "Hey sis, I know things are tense right now, but I really need help. My truck payment is due and I'm short. Can you spot me? I'll pay you back, I swear." I blocked his number too. What they didn't know was that I had been keeping records of everything, including some discoveries I had made while sorting through old bank statements. Like the credit card that had been opened in my name 2 years ago, the one I hadn't authorized, the one tied to the old house address. It had taken some digging, but I had found the applications, the signatures that weren't quite mine, the IP address that traced back to Scott's computer. He had committed identity theft. And I had proof. I called a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in financial fraud. She looked over my evidence with growing interest, her eyebrows rising higher with each document. "This is solid," she said finally. "You could press charges, sue for damages, get restitution for every fraudulent charge." "Let's do it," I said. "All of it." While the legal wheels started turning, Brenda made her move on social media. She started posting vague status updates about ungrateful children, about being abandoned in the dark, about the cruelty of the younger generation. She never mentioned names, but the implication was clear. I watched the posts pile up, watched mutual acquaintances like and comment with sympathy, and I waited. Patience, I had learned, was a weapon too. When the moment was right, I made my own post. Simple, elegant, and devastating. Sometimes, the best gift you can give someone is the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet. The comments started immediately. Old friends from high school who remembered my mom, neighbors who had watched me leave for work before dawn and return after dark, coworkers who had seen me skip lunch for months to save money. They connected the dots. They understood. And then Mrs. Henderson, bless her, commented with the nail in the coffin. "Chloe, honey, I'm so proud of you for getting out of that situation. What you did for that family for years, with no appreciation, it broke my heart to watch. You deserve your own life." The tide turned. Suddenly Brenda's sympathy posts made her look like the villain. People started asking questions. The narrative Brenda had tried to craft crumbled. I didn't engage further. I didn't need to. The truth had a way of surfacing, and I had planted enough seeds. Then came the call from Mrs. Henderson herself, her voice hushed like she was sharing a secret. "Chloe, dear, I thought you should know. I was outside gardening this morning and I heard Richard and Brenda arguing. Their voices carried. Something about the bank account being empty and not being able to afford groceries." I thanked her and hung up, a smile playing at my lips. They were feeling it now. The weight of their own lifestyle, the bills they had always assumed would be paid by someone else, the reality of their financial irresponsibility. My phone buzzed. An email notification. I opened it, and my breath caught. It was from the mortgage company, but it hadn't been sent to me. It had been sent to Richard Miller, with me CC'd as a previous authorized contact on the account. The subject line read, "Urgent, overdue payment and public auction, notice." I opened it with shaking hands. 2 mortgage payments had been missed. The house was in pre-foreclosure. A public auction date had been set for 30 days out. This was it. The ultimate consequence. The final domino. I sat back in my chair, the weight of this information settling over me. I could help. I had money saved now, building back up without the constant drain of their expenses. I could swoop in, pay the arrears, save the house. But why should I? They had never saved me. Not from exhaustion, not from debt, not from the crushing weight of being used. They had laughed when Dad threatened to throw me out. They had mocked my pain. No, they had made their choices. Now they would live with the consequences. I printed the email and waited. They showed up 2 days later, all 3 of them, looking like they hadn't slept. Dad's eyes were bloodshot, Brenda's makeup was smudged, and Scott looked genuinely scared for the first time in his privileged life. Richard didn't bother with pleasantries. "You saw the notice. You're still on some of the bank's contact lists. You know we're going to lose the house." "I saw it," I confirmed. "You have to help us." It wasn't a request. "Even now, in the face of ruin," he demanded. "You can't let this happen. It's your home too." "No," I said calmly. "It was never my home. It was a place where I paid rent in the form of every bill you couldn't be bothered to cover yourselves. A place where I was tolerated as long as I was useful. That's not a home. That's a prison." "Please," Brenda said, and there were actual tears in her eyes. Funny how she could cry for herself but had laughed at my pain. We'll lose everything. We have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you built a lifestyle you couldn't afford on my back. Scott stepped forward, his usual swagger gone. Come on, Chloe, this is crazy. We're family. You can't just abandon family. The laugh that burst from me was sharp and humorless. Family? You want to talk to me about family? Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't commit fraud. Oh yes, Scott. I know about the credit card. The one you opened using my information. The one you've been using for 2 years. The color drained from his face. Brenda gasped. Dad looked confused, then horrified as understanding dawned. I have a lawyer, I continued, my voice steady and cold. I have evidence. I have every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, every illegal charge. You're going to be arrested, Scott. You're going to face criminal charges. And I'm going to sue for every penny you stole, plus damages. Chloe, wait, Scott stammered. No, you wait. You wait and see what happens when the person you've been bleeding dry finally stops bleeding. I looked at each of them in turn. Richard, who had chosen a new wife over his own daughter. Brenda, who had treated me like competition instead of family. Scott, who had seen me as an easy mark. The house is going to auction, I said. You're going to lose it. Scott is going to jail. And I am going to rebuild my life without any of you in it. This is what you wanted, right? For me to stop clinging to your coattails? Congratulations. You're finally free of me. And I'm finally free of you. I pulled out the auction notice, the one I had printed and highlighted. I held it up so they could all see it, then let it flutter down to the porch at Richard's feet like a surrender flag. That, I said, is the price you pay when the person you've drained finally runs dry. I stepped back and closed the door. The lock clicked with a finality that echoed through my entire body. I heard muffled voices, then footsteps retreating, car doors slamming, an engine starting and fading away. I leaned against the door and exhaled. It was done. The next month was a whirlwind of legal proceedings and distant observations. Patricia worked her magic, and Scott was arrested for identity theft and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. He tried to plea bargain, but the prosecution wasn't interested in being lenient. He was looking at jail time and restitution payments that would haunt him for years. I followed the foreclosure proceedings through public records. Dad and Brenda tried everything. They attempted to get a loan, but their credit was destroyed. They asked relatives for help, but Uncle Pete and Aunt Martha had heard the whole story by now and politely declined. They even tried to start a GoFundMe, spinning a tale of medical emergencies and bad luck. But someone, probably Mrs. Henderson, left a comment detailing the truth, and it was shut down within hours. The auction happened on a Tuesday. I didn't go, but my friend Jessica did. She had been my college roommate before I dropped out to work more hours, and she had never liked my family. She understood, maybe better than anyone, what I had been through. She sent me photos. The house with a foreclosure sign, the yard that Dad had always been so proud of, now overgrown. And the final, most poignant image, Richard sitting on the curb, his head in his hands, while Brenda stood next to their SUV, which was packed with whatever belongings they had salvaged. They looked broken, defeated, lost. I stared at that photo for a long time. I waited to feel guilt, remorse, something soft and human. But all I felt was a quiet, settled sense of justice. They had done this to themselves. Every choice, every moment of cruelty, every dollar they had squeezed from me, it had all led here. I set my phone down and looked around my cottage. It wasn't much. The paint was still peeling, the faucet still leaked, the furniture was secondhand. But it was mine. Every stick of furniture, every dish, every moment of peace. Mine. The settlement from Scott's case came through a few weeks later. It wasn't millions, but it was substantial. Enough to cover all the fraudulent charges, plus damages, plus attorney fees. Enough to give me a real cushion, a genuine safety net. I paid off my car. I fixed the leaky faucet. I repainted the living room a warm golden color that made the small space feel like sunshine. I bought a comfortable couch and a coffee maker that didn't require percussive maintenance to function. Small luxuries, each one a reminder that I was no longer living on scraps. I started therapy too. Dr. Sarah Michaels was kind but direct, and she didn't let me wallow in self-pity or second-guess my choices. She helped me see that I hadn't been wrong to want my father's love, but I had been wrong to set myself on fire to keep him warm. She helped me understand that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was self-preservation, that I deserved to be valued, not just useful. Work became easier too. Without the constant drain of supporting 3 adults, I could breathe. I took on a few extra freelance clients, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I built a savings account that wasn't being siphoned off. I planned for a future that belonged only to me. I heard through the grapevine that Richard and Brenda had moved into a small apartment across town. Dad had picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. Brenda had actually gotten a job, her first in years, at a retail store. They were struggling, but they were surviving. Learning, perhaps, what it meant to stand on their own feet. Scott was serving his sentence at a minimum security facility. He would be out in 18 months with good behavior, but the conviction would follow him. Finding work would be hard. Rebuilding his life would be harder. I didn't take pleasure in his suffering, but I didn't regret my actions either. He had stolen from me, not just money but peace of mind, and he was facing the consequences of that choice. 6 months after I left, I went back to school. Not community college this time, but a real university, studying for a degree in forensic accounting. Funny how life worked out. My years of tracking every penny for an ungrateful family had given me skills I could now use to help others, to catch fraud, to protect people like me who had been taken advantage of. I made new friends, people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. I went on dates without feeling guilty for spending money on myself. I laughed more. I slept better. I lived. One evening, I was sitting on my small porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? Chloe. It was Dad. His voice was quiet, stripped of the bluster and arrogance I had grown up with. Please don't hang up. I should have. But something kept me on the line. I'm listening. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. You were right about all of it. We used you. I used you. And I'm sorry. The apology I had craved for years, and now that I had it, it felt hollow. Too little, too late. Okay, I said simply. Is there any chance we could talk? Maybe work toward fixing things? I looked at the sunset, at the peaceful life I had built from the ashes of my old one. I don't think so, Dad. I've moved on. You should too. Chloe, please. I hope you figure things out. I really do. But I can't be part of it anymore. Take care of yourself. I hung up and blocked the number. Dr. Michaels had warned me this might happen, that they might realize what they had lost and come crawling back. She had also reminded me that I didn't owe them forgiveness, didn't owe them another chance to hurt me. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. I posted one final update on social media that evening. A photo of my hand holding a mug of coffee, the keys to my cottage on the table beside it, golden evening light streaming through the window. The caption was simple: "The last ray of sunshine has found its way home." The responses were overwhelmingly positive. Friends celebrating my freedom, acquaintances cheering my strength, even a few people I didn't know well telling me my story had inspired them to set boundaries in their own lives. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a cash machine or a punching bag or a convenient scapegoat. I was Chloe Miller, 27 years old, working on my degree, building a career, creating a life that was wholly and completely my own. The revenge I had taken wasn't just about watching them fail. It was about succeeding without them. It was about proving that I didn't need their approval or their love to have value. It was about standing in the sunshine of my own life and knowing, with absolute certainty, that I had made the right choice. Sometimes I still drive past the old neighborhood. The house has new owners now, a young family with kids who play in the yard. It looks happy in a way it never did when I lived there. I don't feel nostalgic when I see it. I don't feel angry. I just feel free. My story isn't unique. There are countless people out there who give and give until they're empty, who sacrifice themselves for families that don't appreciate them, who confuse obligation with love. To them, I want to say this: you deserve better. You deserve to be valued, not just useful. And you have the power to walk away. It won't be easy. There will be guilt and fear and moments when you question everything. There will be people who call you selfish, who say family is forever, who insist you're making a mistake. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. On the other side of that guilt is peace. On the other side of that toxic relationship is a life that belongs to you. I claimed my life back, one boundary at a time, one closed account at a time, one firm no at a time. And in doing so, I learned the most important lesson of all. The only person responsible for my happiness is me. Not my father, not my stepfamily, not anyone else, just me. And that, more than any revenge, more than watching them lose the house or seeing Scott arrested, is the sweetest victory of all. I am enough. I always was. I just needed to believe it. The last ray of sunshine isn't coming from outside anymore. It's coming from within, and no one can take that away from me ever again.